how come it looks accurate is because she would then employ. It is like the mafia, or like, I mean, it is first of all Martin Scorsese, like to have a producer, Martin Scorsese, it is his view, so he's like the big boss. He for the furniture, he would say, well, you are the set designer, and costume designer is that lady, and what he told her is he wanted something theatrical. So her, she's like, I don't know anything about the 1860s New York fashions, but I will take you and you and you and you and you to supervise. So basically, they might take some people that know an overall history of Western fashion, and she might take, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 max of those and hire those persons, and then they would also rehire, so it always goes down, and the more done it is, the more work they do, but the less money they get. And at the end of the line, I mean, for example, men to supervise or to get advices, or at least on the polite society, so what Boston would have worn, and to some extent even what Bill the Butcher would have worn, because he's trying to act like a dandy, whatever. The men specifically, they might hire somebody like me, or at least it has but with a diploma, and just to have his opinion. We wanted to do that, but is that accurate? And then he would start talking for hours, like myself, to try to explain to idiots that do not know anything if it is accurate or not what they're trying to do. And then the people actually making the costumes with the machine or by hand or whatever also know a lot to some extent, and are being supervised by other people that know more or less as much as me, a bit less, a bit more, a lot less, but they still know their way around, and they create those costumes. So there's not actually her creating she only sketches ideas, and then it is re-seen by actual historian experts to see if, for example, she wanted Bill the Butcher to have, as I said, snug-fitting outfits. And then she passes it on and basically said, this is the idea. We agreed in Martin Scorsese that we want Bill the Butcher to have those patterns, those colors for that outfit, those patterns, those colors for outfit number 2, blah blah blah, and we want all the outfits to be snug fitting, but at the same time we want all of them to be historically accurate, or at the very least believable, for 1862. And so then people like me are like, whoa, is that even possible? And oh yes, it is still possible. It is still the fashion to some degree to have snug-fitting clothes. And because he is older, it also makes sense. And they make their view, they transfer it, it passes through a filter of their pure idea, the pure fantasy of Martin Scorsese and that costume designer, idiotic woman who does not know anything about the either. And she those people transferred to make it believable, and then they again passes it on, so it is again filtered once more, so it becomes from a believable thing to a very believable thing, and at the end of the line it is refiltered even for the little details by people like me that know like every single detail, and suddenly it from very believable it becomes realistic, and then from very realistic it goes, in that movie it even goes to a sort of, not just a little realistic, but medium realistic, as in, it is almost there. Basically, had they reached the very realistically level, I would say they would have done the best job physically possible with their budget, which was still very high, but the whole budget of the movie was $100 million, knowing that was for the entire movie, and they built one of the biggest sets ever made, and they actually built it like they built genuine buildings, not out of plywood, but actual bricks and all. So they had all the budget, that was $100 million for everything, publicity included, so it is not that much for a movie like that. 2 years later, or 3 years later, 2 years later, 2004, a series of unfortunate events with Jim Carrey came out, one of the best films ever, I love it. The budget was $220 million, and so that is simply to give an idea. So $100 million was not that much for this movie, so with that budget, I think they could still have done better, using even less for the costume, but they still did a very good job. Simply the techniques used were too Hollywoodish, too basically hiring a woman that in in the interview she said, I didn't know that part of history. So what I had to do when first I was given the job is I looked at pictures of 1860s fashion plates. I was like, what the hell? Well, what? So you want your movie to be realistic and you give it to a costume designer? Why not give it to Karl Lagerfeld? He was still alive back then. I mean, these are costume designers that work for like channels and they design new things inspired by punk fashions from post 1920 to have nothing to do with people like me that know that live for history, that love history, that since I was a child I was learning through internet and before we had internet books and what men actually were, at least polite society men, what was the fashion in the Western world in the late 19th century. So you should, there are many of those people around without diplomas like myself, or with diplomas, and usually the ones without diplomas like myself are even better. There are many of those, but you could have taken them to supervise the damn thing, instead of taking a bloody costume designer. I'm the costume designer. She's like 50 in the thing, she's like 38, already 38, I'm only 26, and she says, she replies, I did not know anything about that era, so I looked at fashion plate of that era. Not even have internet back then like they do today, so she had to look through like history books and just the fashion plates, and from that she thought she had an education, and she only had not even a year. Like she looked at the fashion plate for a month, and after a month they start building the things on her orders. I mean, what the hell? I have the level I have for men's clothing only. For women's clothing I barely know anything. Because this is a lifetime of education, self-educated education through what? Through internet. I started learning that through internet in 2008. Back then they did not have the advantage of the internet like it was in 2008 and like it has grown and grown since then. In 2002 internet sucked, you had nothing. You did not even have porn on the internet, you had nothing, so she could not even use internet. And with a lifetime of internet, plus between the ages of 4 and 8, I had already like many of the basics learned through books and simply, like I even have originals or things that were almost original, like from the 1920s. So from a lifetime of knowledge, a lot of people have that lifetime of knowledge, some are older than me and started before and all, but you take somebody that does not know anything and looks at the most, like she looks on it would be the equivalent of her looking at the Wikipedia page only, and looking at fashion plates when they are supposed to be recreating the non-fashionable underclass. As she says, you know what, it was very difficult because finally I looked at the fashion place to give me an idea and for Bill the Butcher's outfits and for Boss Tweed and these more upper class members. But for most of the characters, because most of the film is set in the damn 5 parts, we had to recreate. Bloody hell, lady, you did not have to recreate it. It's not because their fashion was not on fashion plate, because they were not fashionable people. There still were already photographs from that era. There were many people drawing them, paintings. Some items have survived. A lot of those things have been described also. Some had survived, for example, until 1900, and then they were in a museum until 1900 or 1950, and photographs were taken, and so even if they had not survived until 2002, they could have consulted those vintage photographs and so on. But you simply say we had to recreate. But then when I see the level of accuracy, clearly, they want to give the credit to her, but clearly she was held by, at least 20 persons with more or less at least a minimum of knowledge for a minimum amount of things that had a minimum serious education in the realm of 1860s mid-Victorian Western clothing, because the thing looks just quite very accurate. I'm only able to tell what is wrong because of my level is like super high, but that is why. And even I have sometimes some doubts. Sometimes I think, to me this seems inaccurate, but is it inaccurate? Or the opposite, this is accurate, but is it really that accurate? And I may have to double check some things if I have time. So this is how these films met. But I mean,